Are you wondering how to become a great designer? One of the most common questions that I've gotten on my channel in the last 3 months is, what's the best way to learn graphic design? Well, I'm here to help you with that. Here's a quick glimpse at some of my prints and design projects. Now, you're going to see a mix of experimental pieces, hand-pulled screen prints, and typefaces that I've been making for the past 30 years. Each piece has its own story, its own process, but I'll save that deep dive for another video. Now, I'm going to tell you the best way to learn graphic design, but in order to do that, I have to talk to you about two paths. Path one is for those attending design school, and path two is for those not attending design school. Wait! So if I'm in design school, I need a plan? I need a plan? Yes. Yes, you do. But I thought that's what school did for me. No, that's not the function of design school. Now, I have run a graphic design grad program for the past 23 years. That's supposed to be where the most committed students working at the highest level go to deepen their understanding of design. To learn quickly and effectively, let's use the strengths of design school. Let's maximize design school strengths and try to eliminate design school weaknesses. And yes, we can use these tools both inside and outside of a design school environment. So if there are two paths, school and no school, and because I run a grad program, I'm going to tell you that the best way to learn graphic design is to go to design school, right? Well, yes, of course. And no, of course not. And it all really depends. You need a plan whether you're in a design program or not. Without a plan and without you taking near complete existential responsibility for your education, see my last episode, you will not be learning graphic design the quote-unquote best way. The biggest trap, downfall, weakness, or limitation of design school, believe it or not, is not the cost. The biggest stumbling block to effective and efficient learning in a classroom-based system, college, is the illusion of progress. Simply attending class constructs an effective illusion that you're actually learning, when in reality, unless you understand the extreme importance of assuming responsibility for the quality of your education, you may be learning very little. It's classroom structure itself that lulls many students into a sleep state. Now, if we're being real, most students are zombies sleepwalking through life. People get bent whenever I say this kind of thing, as if I'm throwing stones, as if I'm saying that all students are stupid, and as if I'm somehow above this criticism. Look, I spent from 5th grade to my freshman year in college asleep in a zombie-like state. So I have been there. I'm trying to get through to you about the things that will matter. This is about so much more than graphic design. The first step in the plan for the best way to learn graphic design is to wake up. Stop being a zombie. Henry David Thoreau reminds us, to be awake is to be alive. I have never yet met a man who was quite awake. How could I have looked him in the face? We must learn to reawaken and keep ourselves awake, not by mechanical aids, but by an infinite expectation of the dawn, which does not forsake us in our soundest sleep. The plan is to leverage the strengths of design school, to optimize them. Design schools are a form of credentialism. People go to schools because the degree can mean something in the job market. The brand name of some schools actually means something. Now, access to equipment. Schools used to be one of the only ways to access specialized equipment or equipment that was too expensive for an individual to purchase. This is no longer the case because of desktop technology. 3D printers, scanners, computers, and cameras are, relatively speaking, dirt cheap. Access to equipment is no longer a reason to attend design school. Now, at this point in the diagram, we begin to see the elements of design school that we will replicate or optimize or leverage. Deadlines. Schools make students work on deadline. This creates a feedback loop and forces the student to work efficiently. What's a feedback loop? It's one of the most important components of learning. A feedback loop is, simply put, to make work, to stop and analyze that work, and then to make corrections and make new work based upon critical feedback in a loop. The more iterations of that loop, the faster the learning curve. Now, excellent design schools, frankly, like Cranbrook, create a culture. They get a group of people together who are all discussing and working on the same issues, approaching problems from similar but different perspectives. They get a group of people together who all challenge each other to do better. Design schools also provide critique. Now, you can think of critique as structured critical feedback from the group. Critique overlaps with the feedback loop in really powerful ways. Now, let's take a look at learning graphic design outside of a school environment. There used to be only two ways to learn graphic design. The first was by going to a trade school or a college and learning about points and picas and typesetting. And the second method was to learn on the job as a commercial artist. Until recently, it was nearly impossible to learn outside of those two methods, but information has escaped the confines of school. The internet has made so much of the technical and conceptual components of design instantly accessible. Online resources are nearly limitless and can be of, frankly, amazing quality. Sources like YouTube and Skillshare really have changed how design schools themselves function. Now, if you're not in design school, the best way to learn graphic design is to replicate those powerful components of design school. And so on both paths, you need a culture, you need people around you who are immersed in the conversation, working on the same problems, approaching similar problems from different angles. This is what great schools bring to the table. And number two, you must work on deadline. In order to get better at anything, you need reps, you need a feedback loop. Working to a deadline forces you to work in a way that design schools actually function. In studios, designers are given briefs, a presentation is scheduled with a client, and unless you want to lose the job, you complete the work on deadline. Professional design is made on deadline. And number three, subject your work to critique. Get access to others' critical opinions about your work and be open to their input. So if the school you're in doesn't have a culture, make one. If you're learning outside of a design school and you don't have a culture to belong to, either make one or join one. The biggest stumbling block to learning is the vacuum. When I was in undergrad, and when I was in my second studio job, and when I was in grad school, I learned the most from the culture. Now, that's a fancy way of saying from the people around me. They inspired me, challenged me, and they helped me. You cannot learn effectively all alone in a vacuum. Now, one of the most effective ways to learn graphic design is to use the absolutely incredible resources available online, frankly. Now, skill building is essential. And yes, even if you're in school, in a classroom setting, the best way to learn design is to build skills with online resources and classroom resources. In my video entitled, I'm going to tell you exactly how to become an excellent designer, I encourage this process. Now, I run a grad design program, and even in that context, I point my students to online learning resources like Skillshare. This overlaps with the idea that in order to learn, you have to take an almost existentialist responsibility for the quality of your learning. You have to wake up and be relentless in your search for greater skills. Now, when writing this episode, I knew that I was going to recommend Skillshare as a resource and was fortunate in that Skillshare offered to sponsor this video. The great part about that is that the first 500 people to use my code, which is in the description below, will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So you can take action on the suggestions in this video with zero financial risk. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of classes led by industry experts across film, illustration, design, freelance, productivity, and more. Skillshare can help you take your career, skills, hobbies, passions, or side hustle to the next level. Learning paths are curated sequential class collections to master a specific skill. A perfect example that relates to this video is the Ellen Lupton class, Graphic Design Basics, Core Principles for Visual Design. This is a class that I would highly recommend. In order to make the most of a resource like this, incorporate the components of the plan that I laid out here. Work to a deadline, get involved in online discussion, and get critical feedback on your progress. Now let's talk about where this all leads. There are levels within levels in all disciplines. Fundamentally, design is a tool to invest your life with greater power. In the example on the screen, what we see is a poster from 2010 that is the product of a thought system and a way of learning. The technical construction of this typography is the result of skill development over time, understanding basic letter form design and the principles of 3D space. As you can see here, the aesthetic of this work, the quote-unquote voice, in quotes, of the work is unique as a result of being part of a culture, a design culture, and understanding how to position the work in that discussion. This work looks like this because it's the product of a culture and a feedback loop over time. And because it was subject to critical thinking. The best way to learn graphic design is simple. It's a 3-point plan. Become part of a culture, establish a feedback loop, and get critique. But Elliot, what if I can't? What if I really can't? Well, you can, and I'm here to help you.